Hi, in this video, let us discuss about the aggregate planning. So what is aggregate planning? An organization can finalize its business plan on the recommendation of demand forecast. So once the business plans are ready, what an organization can do? They start working backward from the final sales unit to raw materials required. So annual and quarterly plans are usually broken down into labor, raw material, working capital, etc. So this could be over a medium range period, that is ranging from 6 months to 18 months or beyond that. So this process of working out production requirement for a medium range, right? We must understand that aggregate planning we do for a medium range. So this medium range period of 6 months to 18 months, any requirement, if we work out for a planning process, we call that as an aggregate planning. So aggregate planning is the process of developing, analyzing, maintaining and scheduling the preliminary approximate schedule of the overall operations of an organization. So the aggregate plan generally contains a targeted sales forecast, production levels, inventory levels and customer backlogs. This schedule is intended to satisfy the demand forecast at a minimum cost. Properly done, aggregate planning should minimize the effects of short-sighted day-to-day scheduling in which small amounts of material may be ordered one week, with an accompanying layoff of the workers, followed by ordering larger amounts and rehiring workers for the next week. So what could be the factors that affect the aggregate planning? So what we have seen so far, we understood that aggregate planning is an operational activity that is critical to the organization as it looks to balance long-term strategic planning with a short-term production process. So these are all the factors. Some of the factors which are listed here are very critical before an aggregate planning process can actually start. So the very first one, a complete information is required about available production facility and the raw material. Second, you need to have a solid demand forecast covering the medium range period, and you need to have a proper financial planning surrounding the production cost, which normally includes the raw material, labor, inventory planning, etc. And then, not the least, the organizational policy, which is very, very important, which is the policy that normally the company makes on the labor management and the quality management. So for the aggregate planning to be successful, we need to have a following inputs, right? So you need to have an aggregate demand forecast for the relevant period. You need to have an evaluation of all the available means to manage the capacity planning like subcontracting, outsourcing, etc. Then existing operational status of the workforce, for example, number of employees and the skill set required, and the inventory level, production efficiency. So aggregate planning will ensure the organization can plan the workforce level, inventory level and production rate in line with its strategic goal and objective. We must always understand aggregate planning is an operational tool. So aggregate planning helps to achieve the balance between operational goal, financial goal and the overall strategic objective of an organization, because it serves as a platform to manage the capacity and the demand planning. So the importance of aggregate planning. Since we have seen the previous slides, we know how important the aggregate planning for the organization is. So the aggregate planning plays a very vital role in achieving long-term objectives of the organization. So the aggregate planning helps in, number one, achieving financial goals. How does it achieve financial goal? Because it has to reduce the overall variable cost and it has to improve the bottom line. Then it has to maximize the utilization of the available production facility. that is economy of scale, maximum utility. Then provide customer delight by matching demand and reducing wait line for the customer, because customers are very important. Upon placing the order, making the customer for a very long period waiting is not advisable. Then reduce investment in inventory stocking, because that takes high cost on taking care of this. And you have to able to meet the scheduling goals, thereby creating a very happy and satisfied workforce. So whenever we discuss about the importance of aggregate planning, it is very important we also talk about the challenges whenever you practice the aggregate planning in your organization. So when the demand needs to be increased to equate or achieve the economies of the scale, some of the challenges would be there on the pricing, promotion, back ordering and new demand creation. So what is pricing? Right? So varying pricing, because that will increase the demand in periods where demand is less than the peak. Increase in price will always bring down the demand. For example, you take any prices for any of the goods, right? So that too, particularly when you do it on the offline or off-season period, it is absolutely not wise. So any pricing policy that will bring in change, that is one challenge. Very importantly, you might do a pricing little higher, maybe you must have taken some promotional activity. So sometimes you want to reduce the price, so that would bring, because we always say that aggregate planning matches with the demand, right? So pricing is the one which that will affect. Second one is the promotion, any advertising, direct marketing or any other forms of promotion where these things will shift the demand, right? Back ordering. So by postponing delivery on current order, demand is shifted to a period when capacity is fully not utilized. So this is really just a form of you are smoothing the demand, right? So service industries are able to smoothen demand by taking the reservation or by making an appointment in an attempt to avoid walk-in customers. So that you must have studied in partitioning of demand that normally we discuss in economics. Next one is new demand creation. So a new and a complementary demand is created for a product or services whenever you reduce the price or do a promotion or you do back ordering, right? So this will increase or frequently divert, right, as the customers taking your products, particularly when you give that as a complementary, right? So other examples include addition of video arcades or expansion of services at a very convenient stores. So these are all some challenges whenever you want to position your product. So that time when the demand increases, that will definitely pose a great challenge on your I can say on your aggregate planning. So next one is the capacity. The first one we discussed about the challenges where the demand we need to match with the aggregate planning, and here when the challenges when necessary to the capacity when it needs to match the demand, right? The first one is hiring or laying off the additional workers, right? By hiring additional workers as needed or by laying off the workers not currently required to meet the demand. So a firm can maintain a balance between this capacity and the demand. The next one is overtime. So whenever there is an increased demand or when you are going to exploit the capacity to the fullest, then you by asking or requiring workers to work extra hours a day or extra day per week, firms can create a temporary increase in capacity without spending additionally on the expenses of hiring additional workers or adding the capacity. Next one is part-time or a casual labor. So by utilizing temporary workers or casual labors, we normally call a casual labor is the worker who are considered permanent but only work when needed. They work on call basis or typically without the benefits given to a full-time workers. Then inventory, finished goods inventory that you can build up in the periods of a slack demand and then you can use to fill the demand during the periods of high demand. So in this way, no new workers have to be hired. So temporary or the casual labor is needed and no overtime is incurred. The next one is subcontracting. So frequently firms choose to allow another manufacturer or service providers to provide the product or services to the subcontracting firms customers. What will happen? This is one of the alternative source when you need additional capacity only for a temporary basis. The next one is cross training. So cross trained employees may be able to perform tasks in several operations, right? So you can make their flexibility according to match your demand. Then other methods, you can say, while varying workforce size and utilization, inventory buildup, backlogging and subcontracting, they are all well-known alternatives. So more novel ways that that we find very useful in industry. So companies and corporates, they always attempt to find interesting and meaningful projects whenever they find when there is necessary, that they take it as a challenge to meet the capacity to the demand or demand to the capacity. So next one, we are moving on to aggregate planning strategy. So there are two pure planning strategies normally we discuss which are available to the aggregate planner. Number one, we call that as the level strategy. Another one is the chase strategy. So these two are a very pure planning strategies available to the aggregate planners. So the level strategy and the chase strategy. So in between, when you mix these two strategies, we get a mixed strategy. So firms may choose to utilize one of the pure strategies in isolation, or they may opt for strategies that combines these two both. That is what I actually meant, which is called a mixed strategy. So when we call that as the level strategy, we call here it is a production rate is very constant, and in chase strategy, production equals the demand. So what is the level strategy? A level strategy seeks to produce an aggregate plan that maintains a steady production rate. So here the production rate is very constant and a steady employment level. So in order to satisfy changes in customer demand, the firm must raise or lower inventory levels in anticipation of increased or decreased levels of demand forecast. So in case of chase strategy, we told you that production equals demand. So chase strategy implies matching demand and capacity period by period. So this could result in the considerable amount of hiring, firing or laying off employees, insecure. So normally whenever there is a hiring or firing, laying off, this brings in a very insecure and unhappy employees. And what happens when there is no demand, whenever you don't produce, and your customers when they don't require the product, ultimately that bring kind of a threat on the employees. So that brings kind of an insecure feeling, and this will make an increased inventory carrying cost, and that also creates problem in labor unions, and there is a erratic utilization of plant and equipment. So it also implies a great deal of flexibility on the firm's part, because you are trying to cut the cost when there is no demand for your products. So the major advantage of chase strategy, I would put in this way, that it allows inventory to be held to the lowest level possible, because you only produce that equals the demand. So you don't produce unnecessarily when there is no demand for the market. So these are all the aggregate planning strategies. So we will further meet with the subsequent videos. Thank you.